I went bankrupt at 59. Had to sell my wedding ring to pay off debt. But 8 years later, I'm living in a tiny cabin by a lake, debt-free, and I've never felt more at peace. Have you ever wondered how your life might end? I used to think I'd retire in a 2-story home in Texas, tending to a garden every morning, maybe watching an old TV with my daughter when she visited for the holidays. But instead, I lost everything. One October afternoon, the bank stamped a foreclosure notice on my front door. I stood on the porch, hands trembling as I held the letter. All I had left was $87 in my bank account and my late wife's wedding ring. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt empty. 59 years old. No house. No money. No retirement plan. I asked myself, where am I going to sleep tonight? Is this really how it ends? But do you know what happened? It was from rock bottom that I started over. No more pride. No more daydreams. Just one thing left, the will to survive. Today, I want to share that journey, not to complain, but to remind you. When you lose everything, you can choose to rebuild. From your first $100. From a small job. From you. Stick with me until the end. I'll tell you how a 59-year-old man not only paid off his debts, but found a life more meaningful than any retirement dream he ever had. My name is Tom Wallace. I was born and raised in the suburbs of Amarillo, Texas. My life's never been glamorous. I didn't graduate college, didn't become a CEO, didn't play the stock market. I just knew how to work with my hands. I opened an auto repair garage when I turned 30, right after I left the military. At first, it was just a tiny shop, enough to scrape by. But I worked hard and built a reputation for honesty. Over time, customers came. I hired help, expanded to 3 locations. I wasn't a millionaire, but I could afford to send my daughter to college and had saved up about $180,000 for retirement, what I proudly called my Sunrise Fund. My wife, Margaret, and I used to dream of retiring in Florida. Or maybe just staying in Texas, buying some land, planting flowers, raising a couple dogs. She passed away 2 years ago from cancer. Since then, everything changed. Maybe I was grieving too hard, but I threw myself into expanding the business. A new partner came along, promising huge growth, and I believed him. I pulled out half my retirement savings, took out loans, signed personal guarantees without reading the fine print. I told my daughter, I'm building something to leave behind for you. But I was wrong. Just 1 year later, the new branch tanked. Customers dried up. The partner vanished. I was drowning in debt. I spent sleepless nights at the kitchen table, staring at bills, trying to find a way out. Sometimes I talked to my wife like she was still there. Honey, your Tom messed up big this time. I slashed spending, sold off furniture, even drove my 20-year-old pickup making night deliveries. But the debt kept growing, like a crack spreading through the foundation of my life. And then came the day I'll never forget, the day I got the foreclosure notice. It wasn't just a house, it was the place where Margaret and I had hung our wedding photo, where we'd hugged each other every morning. I used to think I was approaching retirement. But instead, I was about to lose everything at 59. And that was only the beginning. I left that house one cold morning in early December. The sun hadn't risen. No one saw me lock the door for the last time. In my backpack, a few changes of clothes, a small urn with my wife's ashes, and a little notebook filled with debt. I used to be reliable. I was Tom the mechanic, the guy neighbors trusted with their house keys. I taught my daughter how to check engine oil. I used to hug my wife every night and promise her I'd take care of everything. But now? I was a 59-year-old man with no home, no retirement, no health insurance, and nothing to cling to except the past. I didn't tell anyone. Not even my daughter, who was teaching in Oklahoma. I was too ashamed. I couldn't bear her worried eyes. Couldn't stand the thought of her selling her old car just to send me a few $100. I slept in my pickup truck. Every morning, I'd wash up in a public restroom and try to look normal. Some days, I spent hours in the library just to stay warm and unnoticed. Once, I nearly broke down in tears at the reading room when I saw a book titled Financial Freedom Retirement by 40. To me, retirement now felt like a cruel joke. I asked myself, where did I go wrong? Was I too ambitious? Should I have just held on to my retirement savings and lived modestly till the end? But in the darkest corner of that despair, a quiet thought emerged. If I'm still alive, if I still have my hands and some strength left, maybe I haven't lost yet. I started looking for odd jobs, unloading trucks at night, raking leaves, gardening, even collecting aluminum cans in the park. I tracked every dollar. With every step I took down that nameless road, I told myself, Tom, you're not done yet. Not like this. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But I knew this. I couldn't die in silence. I couldn't let my life end in a Walmart parking lot. And from that darkest place, a new journey began. It was a January night. The wind howled through the cracked window. I was curled under a thin blanket, sitting behind the wheel, holding tightly to Margaret's urn, the one thing I couldn't bear to leave behind. I had been sleeping in my truck for nearly 6 weeks. First by the park, then behind a grocery store where there was a streetlight and free Wi-Fi. Sometimes security guards kicked me out. Other times I quietly left before anyone noticed I still existed. That night, I had exactly $47.18 in my bank account. My credit card debt had ballooned to over $32,000 thanks to the personal guarantee I'd signed for the failed branch. I received an email from the bank threatening to sue if I didn't make a payment. I looked at the number and felt nothing. I felt like an empty gas tank stranded on the side of the road beyond repair. No home. No steady income. No health coverage. The future had vanished. Old age was approaching like a winter storm, slow, cold, and merciless. And then, I looked at Margaret's urn. I could almost hear her saying, "Tom, I didn't need you to be rich, I needed you to survive." I broke down. For the first time in years. I cried like a child in that cold car in the middle of the night. Cried out of regret. Out of exhaustion. Out of feeling useless. But also because I was still alive. And right then, in that moment of despair, I made a vow to myself. If I've hit rock bottom, then there's only one way left to go, up. I turned on my phone and searched for manual labor jobs near me. I found a lumber mill 14 miles away hiring for a night shift janitor, minimum wage, no benefits, but they offered a place to rest and a simple meal. I started the engine, not even sure if I had enough gas to make it. But I went. And I never returned to that parking lot. That was the night I stopped dreaming of retirement. That was the night I started dreaming of survival. The lumber mill was out of town, far from the lights and busy streets. My job was to mop the floors, push scrap carts, and sweep up sawdust at the end of each shift. At first, I thought I'd last just a few days. But I worked like I was making amends. The night shift started at 6 p.m. and ended at 4 a.m. They gave me a spot in the workers' restroom, not fancy, not warm, but clean and quiet. There, I met people who had lost everything like me, a divorced veteran, a single mom who'd gone bankrupt, and an undocumented immigrant. No one asked me what I used to have. They only cared if I showed up on time and worked hard. For the first time in months, I didn't feel judged. I reopened my old notebook, not a list of debts anymore, but a survival plan. Each week, I divided my paycheck like this. 60% to pay off credit debt. 20% into an emergency fund. 10% for food and soap. 10% for hope, that's what I called it, a small amount I set aside to dream of renting a room or having a diner meal without counting every penny. I started reading books on personal finance. I tracked every expense. I learned to use my phone to manage a budget. One night, I read an article on my phone, 60-year-old man retires early by living simply and investing monthly. I laughed. I thought, yeah, everything I don't have. But then I thought again, I've got nothing left to lose. I just need 10 more years of living decently, living right. Not to retire like other people, but to no longer feel like a burden. I opened an automatic savings account. Every week, even if it was just $25, I put it in like a promise to myself. I'm not dead and I won't drift forever like this. I didn't know what the future held, but I started to feel rhythm, order, meaning. And then one night, while sweeping sawdust, I said to myself, Tom, maybe this is a different kind of retirement, not about rest, but about rebirth. By the 4th month at the lumber mill, I'd saved enough to rent a tiny room behind an old grocery store. It was barely 200 square feet, with a twin bed, a hot plate, and a window that looked out over a tangle of power lines in the alley. But to me, it was a castle. I started living slow. After each shift, I'd come home, wash my face, make coffee, and turn on the radio to listen to late-night call-in shows. I kept a journal. I tracked every penny. I read books, not auto repair manuals anymore, but books about meditation, minimalism, and the philosophy of aging in Japan. I met an old lady named Helen at the library, 68, a retired librarian with less than $20,000 in savings. She lived simply and taught me about the art of letting go of expectations and how to live without being haunted by past failures. One day, she told me, Tom, we don't get to choose how we fall, but we do get to choose how we rise. That sentence etched itself into my heart. I started to rethink what retirement meant. I used to think it was a reward for the rich. Now I believe it's the moment you stop fearing tomorrow. It's when you have just enough simplicity, enough peace to not feel jealous, to not feel regret. I recalculated everything. If I saved $50 a week, if I kept my cost of living low, if I worked until I was 65, Then I could have about $15,000 in real savings, not a lot, but enough to rent a trailer near a lake, plant a few rows of vegetables, and live off modest Social Security checks. And more importantly, I wouldn't be a burden to my daughter. I rewrote my will. I apologized to her in a letter. I told her everything. And I wrote, "I'm not rich, but I've learned how to live again. From the beginning. From the ashes." By then, I no longer dreamed of a new car or a vacation in Hawaii. I only dreamed of waking up each morning knowing I still mattered. And going to bed each night without shame for the man I used to be. Sitting at the old desk in my tiny rented room behind the grocery store, I opened a blank sheet of paper and wrote in big letters at the top. The next 10 years, live them right. I was 55. If I stayed healthy, I could work until 65. Retiring 10 years later than most, but to me, those were not 10 years of delay. They were 10 years of rebirth. I divided life into 3 parts. 1. Finance, I needed a clear plan, no matter how modest. 2. Body, I had to stay healthy so I wouldn't become a burden. 3. Mind, I needed to heal, to forgive, and to accept. For finances, I opened another automatic investment account. Every month, even if just $100, I put it into a simple index fund. Helen, the librarian, showed me how to use free growth tracking. Just let time do its work, she said. You don't need much, just consistency. I also signed up for a soft skills class at the community library, learning about money management, positive mindset, and self-care in old age. No one in the class knew I had gone bankrupt. No one knew I had once lived in a truck. And I no longer felt the need to explain. I also started walking every morning. At first, just 10 minutes, then 20. I began sleeping better, eating simple meals, oatmeal, boiled eggs, steamed vegetables from the discount farmer's market. And then, I started helping others. One day, I saw a young worker at the factory who had just been fired for being late. He was sitting in the parking lot, crying, with nowhere to go. I didn't have much money, but I sat down next to him, shared half my egg sandwich, and said, "I've lost everything before. Trust me, you won't be stuck at the bottom forever." And as I said it, I realized something. I was beginning to feel valuable again. Not because of money, but because of experience, because of my scars. That night, I wrote in my journal, "Sowing seeds is my job. Blooming is up to time. Today, I begin to sow." And for the first time in years, I felt peace. Not because I was safe, but because I was finally heading in the right direction. One weekend afternoon, I was sitting in a small roadside cafe, a place I used to visit before the bankruptcy, when suddenly I saw Mike, my old best friend. He was sitting there with the same smile, eyes full of curiosity, though a bit cautious. We used to be inseparable, working together, dreaming of the future. But when I hit rock bottom, I pulled away from everything. The calls, the messages, they faded out. I had assumed he, like everyone else, had abandoned me. This time, I felt the deep contrast between us. Mike was still thriving in finance, dressed in a sharp suit, talking about big projects he was involved in. And me? Just a man trying to rebuild from the ashes. I felt a little embarrassed, maybe even wanted to avoid him. But when Mike looked at me, he didn't show pity or judgment. He asked directly, "Tom, are you okay? Are you doing better than the last time we saw each other?" That question felt like medicine. I didn't need to explain or defend myself. I just looked him in the eye and said, "I'm coming back to life." Starting with the smallest things. We talked about failures, lessons, and perseverance. I told him about the factory job, about Helen, the woman who helped me believe again. Mike shared about the pressure at work and how close he'd come to breaking at times. That conversation helped me realize something important. The past doesn't have to hold us back, it can teach us how to move forward. I no longer wanted to hide from old friends or past memories. I wanted to embrace them and use them as fuel. After we met, I went home feeling lighter. The past was no longer a burden, it was now part of my toolkit. I understood that to keep going, I had to face it, forgive, and accept myself, with all the mistakes and pain. I wrote in my journal, "Seeing Mike again was like having a conversation with myself. A real, unfiltered dialogue. I'm no longer afraid of the past." After that, I began to see everything through a different lens. No more burying myself in regret or shame. I knew I had to move forward, rebuild trust in myself, and create a future even if it was small, as long as it was real and lasting. I started spending more time learning, not to get rich, but to become capable of caring for myself. I took free classes on personal finance, read books on self-development, and challenged myself with new jobs, even if they were small or temporary. One thing I learned, trust doesn't just appear. It's built through action. Every morning, I did light exercise. Every week, I made a budget and tracked my savings. Every month, I reviewed my progress. I also opened up more to people around me, started reconnecting with old friends. I wasn't afraid to share my story anymore or to talk about failure and vulnerability. I realized that sincerity and humility are bridges. They help us connect and get support when we need it. Most importantly, I began setting small, realistic goals for each year ahead instead of chasing distant fantasies. I wanted a stable life, good health, family by my side, and the ability to look back on my journey with gratitude rather than regret. I wrote in my journal, "Trust doesn't come from never falling, it comes from daring to stand up each time we fall. The future isn't uncertain, it's something we choose to walk toward." I knew the journey ahead was long. Some days I'd feel tired, even doubtful. But now I wasn't alone. I had my story. I had friends like Mike. I had Helen and others walking with me. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I'm ready to face it with a resilient heart and a hopeful soul. Just a few months after I began this new path, the factory where I worked ran into financial trouble. Production dropped, orders slowed, and many of us, myself included, had our hours cut. The little savings I had scraped together suddenly felt tight again. I remembered those unemployed days from before and my heart sank. But this time I didn't let fear take over. I chose to face it. I started picking up side jobs, making deliveries, doing minor repairs around the neighborhood. No job was too small. I treated each one as a chance to learn and gain experience. I also looked for free vocational training classes in the community to grow my skills. Flexibility and perseverance helped me keep some income flowing, even if it was modest. More importantly, I didn't let myself fall into despair. I kept journaling every day, focusing on the small wins and positive moments, however tiny they were. The financial challenges were still there, but I learned how to adjust my spending more wisely. I gave up unnecessary habits, only bought what I truly needed, and prioritized saving every penny. At the same time, I improved my health with a simple diet and regular exercise to stay optimistic and mentally strong through tough times. Whenever I felt exhausted, I would call Helen or Mike. Sharing my thoughts and receiving their advice and encouragement became a precious source of strength that kept me from giving up. I began to realize that challenges weren't just obstacles, they were also tests of my willpower and determination. I couldn't control everything, but I could control how I responded and how I kept moving forward. I wrote in my journal, "Hardship doesn't break me, it reflects my persistence and inner strength. Every step, no matter how small, is undeniable progress." While I was still struggling with work and finances, I happened to meet Linda, a middle-aged woman volunteering at the community center. She had kind eyes and a gentle smile. We struck up a conversation and quickly became friends. Linda wasn't just a simple friend, she was a valuable source of emotional support. She had been through major upheavals in her life, and her story gave me strength. She taught me to view hardships as challenges that help us grow. Through Linda, I discovered a support group for people who were unemployed or facing financial difficulties in the community. I decided to join. There, I no longer felt alone or out of place. I met people just like me, people who kept trying, whose success stories began with failure. One time during a group meeting, I shared my story. My honesty and openness resonated with many. One of them, Mr. David, a retired businessman, offered to coach me on personal finance and connected me with workshops to improve my skills. The support didn't stop there. Another new friend, Sarah, a retired teacher, invited me to join community activities, helping me expand my social network and find joy in helping others. Day by day, I felt the power of connection. It wasn't always about money or jobs, the most important things were people, shared experiences, and compassion. I slowly let go of the shame of the past and replaced it with hope for the future and with gratitude for those walking alongside me. I wrote in my journal, "Everyone who enters our lives brings a gift. Open your heart and you'll never have to walk alone." These new relationships not only provided me with emotional and practical support but also inspired me to keep going, to make each day more meaningful. One crisp autumn morning, while attending a small workshop on social entrepreneurship hosted by the community support group, I heard the story of a middle-aged man who had once lost everything but went on to build a small business that helped people like me. That story sparked an idea I'd never considered before. Why not try starting something small that could help both myself and others? I thought back to the years I spent working in a factory, the bits of experience I had in organization and management, the skills I once thought had been buried by failure. And I thought of Helen, the one who always believed in me, who encouraged me to never give up. That was my turning point. I decided to start a small project, a home delivery service for my neighborhood where many elderly residents and others couldn't easily go out shopping. I borrowed an old bicycle, hand-delivered flyers advertising the service, and began step by step. It wasn't easy. In the early days, I handled all the deliveries myself, braving bad weather and the challenges of managing orders and customers. But I didn't give up. Every successful delivery brought a sense of joy, a motivation to keep going. Gradually, more people heard about my little service and came to trust it. I hired a few helpers and started earning a more stable income. More importantly, I discovered the real meaning behind the work, not just surviving, but creating value for the community. That turning point wasn't just a new beginning in my career, it was a rebirth of my spirit. I learned that failure doesn't mark the end, it can be the launch pad for something greater as long as we stay persistent and believe in ourselves. I wrote in my journal, "Turning points aren't random strokes of luck, they're decisions to change and the courage to take action. Life gives us many chances if we're brave enough to take them." Once my small delivery project began to stabilize, I realized that recovery isn't just about money or employment. It's a journey of renewal, learning to love and respect yourself again. Every day, I took time to reflect on what I'd been through, the painful failures that were, in fact, rich with lessons. I came to understand that failure isn't the end, but a stepping stone toward future success. What matters is how we respond and how we turn setbacks into strength to keep moving forward. I also came to see how essential support from loved ones and friends truly is. I learned to open up, to share my feelings without shame, and to accept help when I needed it. This made me feel less alone in the journey. Another equally important lesson was patience. Recovery doesn't happen overnight. There were days I felt tired and lost, but I kept reminding myself that every small step matters and that I had to keep the faith. I also learned to manage my finances more carefully. Saving and investing even tiny amounts helped me slowly rebuild a stable foundation. I set long-term goals, always remembering that health and mental well-being are the most valuable assets we have. As the days went by, I felt myself growing stronger, calmer in the face of life's pressures. I knew I was becoming not just more financially secure, but also more resilient, both mentally and emotionally. I wrote in my journal, "Healing is the journey of learning to love yourself. It's a process of continuous growth and moving forward no matter how hard it gets. Every wound is a mark of strength and resilience." After months of struggling through hardship, I began to appreciate every quiet moment of peace in life. It wasn't about the grand achievements or the financial success I once chased, it was the small, simple things that brought me the deepest joy. I remember the early mornings when soft sunlight streamed through the window and birds sang outside. I'd sit with a cup of coffee, feel its warmth in my hands, and let my mind settle. In those moments, I knew I was still alive, that I still had the chance to begin again. I started spending more time walking in the nearby park, breathing in the fresh air and listening to the rustle of leaves beneath my feet. Each step along that familiar path was a quiet reminder that life still held so much beauty. Even the simplest family meals took on new meaning. We shared stories, laughed freely, and those moments melted away all the stress and fatigue. I realized the real value wasn't in fancy dishes, but in the connection and love we shared at the table. Helping others also brought me a joy I hadn't felt in years. I joined volunteer efforts in the community, offering support to people going through the same struggles I once faced. The smiles and grateful eyes of those I helped gave me renewed strength and purpose. I learned that happiness isn't a destination, it's found in the journey itself, in the simple experiences that surround us. When we pause, take notice, and truly appreciate what we have, life becomes rich with color and meaning. I wrote in my journal, "Happiness doesn't live at the end of the road, it lives in each step we take. In the morning sun, the sound of laughter, and the embrace of those we love." These simple joys helped me regain balance and gave me the strength to continue my journey of healing and rebuilding a new future. After all the hardship and the journey of rediscovering joy in life's simple things, I realized it was time to take a new step, not just to heal, but to truly assert myself and create a life that's sustainable and meaningful. I began setting clear, realistic goals for the future. No longer chasing lofty ambitions, I focused on daily, monthly, and yearly steps, rebuilding my financial foundation, learning new skills, and most importantly, developing a resilient and optimistic mindset. I enrolled in business management and soft skills courses, expanding my knowledge and staying up to date with current trends. I knew that if I wanted to move forward, I had to keep learning and evolving. At the same time, I started building professional relationships, reaching out to existing connections and forming new ones. I learned to communicate more effectively, express my ideas clearly, and approach challenges with greater confidence. Most importantly, I began to find myself again, a man who is persistent, unshaken by adversity, always willing to learn and adapt in pursuit of a better life. I wrote in my journal, to affirm yourself isn't arrogance, it's the honest recognition of your own value and capability. Only when we know who we are can we walk forward with strength and build the future we want. I started developing a plan to expand my delivery service, exploring partnership opportunities, and launching meaningful community projects. Step by step, I wasn't just transforming my life, I was creating value for others too. There are still challenges ahead, but I no longer feel fear or isolation. I've learned to rise after every fall, to appreciate myself, and to keep moving forward. My recovery journey isn't just a personal story, it's a message to anyone who feels like they've hit rock bottom. Believe that from the broken pieces, we can rebuild a brighter and more complete life. After years of perseverance and rebuilding from the rubble, I finally reached financial freedom, not in the flashy sense of wealth, but in the calm stability that lets me live without daily financial stress. Looking back at the journey from exhausting days of non-stop work just to make ends meet, to today when I can spend time with family, explore personal interests, and contribute to meaningful community work, I feel a deep sense of gratitude. But more important than anything, I've found peace within myself, a calm that no amount of money can buy. I've learned to slow down, to savor every moment, and to cherish the life I've built. I now spend more quality time with loved ones, sharing peaceful evenings, simple stories, and moments filled with warmth and connection. That closeness is my most priceless treasure, the greatest source of motivation to keep loving life and living fully. Financial freedom has also given me the confidence to face the future. Whatever may come, I know I have a strong foundation to get through it. That peace of mind is the greatest gift I've ever received. I wrote in my journal, financial freedom is freedom of the soul. When we are no longer controlled by fear or worry, and can live true to ourselves and the values we believe in. This journey isn't over, but now I walk it with a different spirit, stronger, more confident, and full of hope. No matter how hard life gets, I know I can always rise and keep moving forward. And having come through the darkest times, I know I can't keep the story to myself. It's too valuable, filled with lessons that others may need, those looking for a spark of hope or a reason to keep going. I've started sharing my journey, its ups and downs, failures and small wins, through conversations with friends, family, and eventually the broader community. I've joined startup support groups, spoken at seminars, and participated in community events where I could offer my experience and encourage others not to give up. Every grateful glance, every warm smile I received as people listened to my story filled me with comfort and renewed motivation. I came to realize that anyone can rebuild their life if they're brave enough to face their reality and keep pushing forward. I didn't stop at simply telling my story aloud. I began writing a blog, joining online forums, and sharing on social media so my journey could reach more people. I wanted to prove that failure isn't the end, it's an opportunity to start over, to grow, and to live with more purpose. Sharing became a form of healing for me. Seeing how my experience helped others gave me a profound sense of fulfillment and joy. That's also what drives me to keep striving to live better each day. I wrote in my journal, when we share our stories and experiences, we don't just help others, we enrich our own souls. Inspiration, when spread, is a powerful force that can transform lives. I believe that every person has the power to make a difference. And when my story becomes someone else's source of strength, that's the greatest success I've ever known. As my story gained traction and was met with positive response, I realized I had a greater responsibility, not just to change my own life, but to help others rise and rebuild from challenges that once seemed impossible to overcome. I decided to dedicate more time to developing support programs for those newly facing failure, people who were searching for a new direction in life. I partnered with social organizations and startup groups to build sustainable, practical support networks. My new mission isn't just to inspire, it's to create real-world solutions, helping people gain the knowledge, skills, and confidence they need to rebuild their lives. I want to build a community where people can learn, share, and grow together. At the same time, I continue to better myself by staying curious and informed, keeping up with trends in business, finance, and personal development. I believe that only by continuously moving forward can I become a true role model for others. I also prioritize time with my family, knowing that their love and support are my greatest source of strength. Together, we're building a new life, not perfect, but deeply meaningful and whole. I wrote in my journal, the journey has no final destination, only continuation and growth. When we find our mission, each day becomes an opportunity to do better, to live more fully. Now, I no longer look back on the past with pain or regret, but with gratitude, because it was the hardships that shaped me and helped me discover my true path. I believe life always gives us second chances, third, even fourth, as long as we never give up. and I will keep walking forward with faith and determination, ready for whatever comes next.